Welcome to the space where we're exploring a vision for how to live well in the things we can't help but face. I'm Jason Jensen, and I'm here with my buddy Pete. So we've got a special break in our series today. And the reason for that is you've hit a milestone of making Vocatio, the organization that I guess it's been around for a long time, but it's emerged in a very different way recently.
Sure.
And you've made that public after quite a bit. And today we thought it would be good to unpack that journey for people as a way to get to know you, why we're in this kind of space together, and what a journey that looks like that is. And I've got a question for you to kind of kick it off.
Sure.
When did you first realize that as a clinical psychotherapist, you needed to have an iteration of your calling outside of being in the therapist chair and being emerging in the world more broadly? What was the first moment where you kind of understood that that was happening to you?
That is a beautiful question, and a sizable one. I think it actually began before I entered the profession. And I had a nascent or a sense that was beyond what I was able to understand at the time. But I knew that there was some mode of engaging life and the common matters that we all face in it with hope. And I think that's really what I was questing after along this way. Whether it was in my early days in carpentry or in as a laborer in the tree planting world or foreman there, I think holding together with people what we all carry in the common spaces of our humanity, I think that was always destined to be a central theme in what was offered of my life. And that didn't come into clarity in any kind of easy way, or immediate way. And I don't know that it does for most people. Inside of the work of psychology, I think it was a clear sense that psychology in its forms, in its common forms, and clinical psychology in particular, was cast as a remedy in a way that I didn't see being able to make good on the promise of. And it's not because it's populated by people who are incompetent or don't have kind interests that they're submitting into the work that they take very seriously. It's because of the medium itself that it occurs outside of where we live and move and have our being. It's a necessary break taken from all of that and a concentrated look at what might be right or wrong in that space. But if it isn't brought into a communal form, in the end, if the interest of the psychotherapist is not to cite as the win with their client, them embedded in robust community, then it hasn't brought something complete into the human space. And there are many colleagues that I have that occupy those spaces with great honor, and I refer to them routinely. And I'm thankful that they're there. I spent near to 18 years in various forms of private practice, 16 years explicitly in my own private practice. And I can't tell you how thankful I am for the trust that people brought into that space with me. I think I always knew that at some point in the future, I would have to be called out of that into a reflection on what all of that meant in the whole of it, and then to represent that back to the people that had so bravely trusted our encounters with their very lives, you know. And when your work involves convening with people around those matters, the matters that stop us in our tracks, the matters that we lose sleep over, the matters that our whole heart is invested in, whether it's, you know, with spouses or in the parenting space, or the overcoming of addiction, or the facing and overcoming of abuse, the aspirations we hold in career, the secrets we don't know how to hold within ourselves and don't know how to bring to another. All of that stuff is what is brought to you in that space. And it is just the highest honor that you could possibly think of. And there isn't a break from it. You just swim in it daily. I love storytelling, and I love stories being well told to me. And I think after, 22,000 hours of therapy, the longing in my heart emerged to tell the story of that back to the people that I had worked with. And I think that whatever else the platforming of Vocatio happens to become for people, if it can be that in a sense, I'd be honored. That would feel like a win to me. And it's also a way to express back to people the ways that they've informed me and formed me in our relationships. My education has been a human education, an education in humanity. And it becomes an education by proxy for so much else besides, because people bring what is most important to them into that space with you. So I think, as I look back on it, I had a sense that I wouldn't have been able to articulate, that I wouldn't be there for the duration of my career.
Yeah. So let me recap.
Yeah.
Before you even entered the study of psychology, you knew that there was this, and you, like many of us, we look back and go, oh, this was here, but it was like even pre-language of a sense of like, I'm called to the living of life well.
Yeah.
Or some of the deepest answers to life being something that you could share with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And the next or the immediate step in the journey from having that sense, even in your carpentry days and all that, was like, oh, I think I need to go and study psychology under, the
best minds I can find.
Yeah. And then that leads to this moment where you enter into this profession and you're like, hey, I know this profession has something for me, but it's not the entirety.
Mm-hmm.
But giving it to you faithfully, and then all these beautiful souls that get entrusted to you in one way.
Yeah.
You get to be with, and that it's beautiful. And as we kind of talk about it, I would maybe, if you'd be willing,
mm-hmm.
share the moment where you realized that your practice in the form it took had to come to an end.
Poof.
Do you remember that moment?
Oh, yeah.
Could you describe it?
I can try. that is that moment has a lot of weight to it.
Mm.
Because what occurred in that space was, I think it was long in its arrival, and it was always going to be the case that that decision would be first invited and then guided along by people I trusted, because I was given into that space with conviction, and I was really turned inside out on the matter of how people who were so invested there would continue to be cared for in the ways that I hoped they could. And I had been developing some heart problems, candidly, that were the result of some imbalance in my life. That was related to doing too many clinical hours.
Like physical
heart issue that my cardiologist now for the second go had named as the result of stress. And the stress wasn't just the work. It was the question, am I still called to be where I am? And I'm a person who regards that question with a great deal of care and interest in answering truthfully. And there was a pre-contemplative kind of awareness in me that a lot of people around me could sense and feel, but that I needed some friendly ambassadors into the actual articulation of. And there were a lot of people in that community, good people. You were one of them. Our mutual friend Jake Kim and I were preparing some talks that we were going to be giving at a men's retreat that he had asked if I would join him in keynoting. And I was on his back porch with him, and I was talking about this forthcoming sabbatical that I had to take to get my legs under me again. And we were looking off kind of into middle distance in his backyard towards Golden Ears Provincial Park. And he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And he said, "Why are you considering going back at all?" And I couldn't have told you in advance what framing of that question I would need in order to get me over the line onto the other side of the ledger in terms of clarity. But I'll tell you that when he asked me that question, it froze me solid, because someone had named a possibility that felt simultaneously to be in conflict within me, but also out of reach if it were to be pursued. I don't know how I would do that. We're a single income family. All these people depend on me. I'm tethered to the work because of the provision to my kids and everything besides. It's still a deep interest of mine. I love these people I work with. I'm given to the work in a way that I care about and am aligned in. But he asked me that question, and my answer to him in the moment was, I don't know. And I left there and went home. It was the end of the day. My wife, by this time, was gainfully employed in a new career that she loves and is very good at. And she had come home from her work day and found me on the back deck. And I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost or something. And she said, "Are you okay?" And I, in a vacant kind of way, I think I said yes, as if to say, "I think so," you know. And she said, "How was your time with Jake?" And she's a fireball and hummingbird, and she's got a lot of energy. And I said, it was good. It was a good time. She said, I said, "Jake asked me a question." She said, "What was the question?" I said, "Why I was considering going back to clinical work." And she said, "What did you answer him?" And I said, "I told him I don't know." And she said, "Pete, what is your answer?" And I didn't have language for what came out of me in that moment. I sobbed. And it was not regret. It was not remorse. It was not shame. It was an answer that came from my soul with a certainty, a clarity that I know one thing. I'm done with that work in that way. And I feel summoned into something else. And if I don't move in that direction, if I don't explore what that is in me, it will lead to a kind of ruin in my person. And maybe ultimately, because of the health effects of not being aligned within yourself around such matters. And tears came out of me in that moment, and imagery associated with it, and all of these precious people coming to mind. And it was accompanied by this refrain, this prayer that just kind of came out of me like rolling waves on an ocean. "God, please take care of them all." And it was just, this decision's been made. I'm still figuring out what it means in me, but I don't have a way to secure my hopes for them. And so I'm going to have to turn this over to prayer. And of course, that's always the bargain anyways when you're a therapist. You hope in the same way that you do with your kids, you know, but you have no guarantees on any of it, what you're processing, landing in the ways that you might hope for. And sometimes that's good because maybe you're not hoping for the right thing for somebody. And so it's that big. And so I was saying that on repeat. I was in a bit of a daze, but I was crying loud enough that Candy saw fit to throw a towel over my head and put her arm around me and just quietly issue me into my bedroom, where I got on my knees and begged of God to take care of the people that I had been working with, and take care of me in the emerging awareness about what was happening within me. Take care of my family, because I don't know what we're going to do. I just know I think I have to press go on this as an aspiration that my whole life is given to, my whole self. And that was 3 years ago. And in the space in between, there's been a lot that's happened, and there was a lot that led to that moment, you know. But that really was the catalyzing moment. And it had been whispered at and hinted in communal spaces in the fatigue that people were witnessing on me. But fatigue wasn't the whole of it. It was also a sense of call, right? And if I'm to be faithful to the principles that I espouse in front of people, then I have to put my money where my mouth is, and I have to, with some courage and with some determination, explore what living in such a manner looks like. And this is my attempt at that.
Yeah, so you had already said, hey, I need a sabbatical just because of health reasons.
Yeah.
You have this moment during your sabbatical where you are...
I wasn't actually yet on sabbatical.
Okay, so you're still doing clinician work.
I was, yeah.
Okay.
And the prospect of doing this men's retreat had come. And so I was just sitting with Jake in a preliminary kind of way, talking through what that could be.
Mm-hmm.
And that question was asked a month and a half before I went on my sabbatical.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you had already said this is the end date of being in the therapist chair before sabbatical.
Yeah.
And then it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's funny? Something that you might not even know is that Jake and I were meeting prior to that. We were discerning who would be the the men's ministry has been Jake's ministry.
Yeah.
And I've, helped him and, being a confidant in discernment and sorts of things like that. And Jake had a sense that one was supposed to be on being a disciple or an apprentice of Jesus. And he's like, the guy I know who can do this is Pete. And so we're like, cool, so I was there in the moment. It's funny to see special. Kind of some of these other moments that, just that intertwine between us. And the next one I remember is well, first I want to go to, what was the last day like of when you did your last session with someone?
Yeah. It was a bit of a spin. I was graced.
Do you remember what you felt that morning as you woke up, knowing you were going into work?
I was so flooded, Jason. I was just trying to get through those days with a maintained focus on those needs and not to have the space overwhelmed for people by what my departure meant otherwise. And to just want to bring faithful closure to people. And you can't ever do that perfectly. It's too complicated a matter for it to be neat and tidy. So I was flooded, and I was in a state of wonder about it all. I think my ears were ringing a little bit. My head was humming. But I do know, I can recall that while I was in prayer leading up to the moment, the prospect of leaving my office on the last day, after I had sent my last bit of furniture into the moving truck and sent it on its way, the idea emerged in prayer to walk out that door and then to walk home. And I mean that literally. And I live about a 15-minute drive from where I used to work. I drive down a mountain and to that building. And walking away felt symbolically appropriate. And so I walked out that door and walked up that hill to my home. And the amount of time that took proved to be the exact amount of time needed to pray for everybody in my practice by name. And it felt like a pilgrimage into a new season for me, and something that could mark it as a rite of passage or something, and something I knew I needed to face alone in a real sense. That part of it, to host that within me, between me and God. And being in motion, I don't know what I looked like as I was if you're a passerby on the road, there's a crazy man talking to himself as he's walking up a hill, is what people might have imagined.
Did you have a piece of paper with names on it or something? You just
just went through them all. Yeah. And, it was going to take as much time as that took. The prayer was very similar for all of them, whatever their bespoke needs are, just that they would be well and that they would be held inside of their beautiful interests and their needs, and that they would encounter the resource they still needed in order to do well with their aspirations and heal. And that was a beautiful experience, and it did mark the moment for me in a vivid way. And then I thought the worst part of it would be trying to find healing when you're in that space and you're doing so many clinical hours, and you've got a family and children besides, and for the majority of that time, that business has been what has sustained your family life. There ends up being not a lot of margin for you in that space. And you can plan as well as you want, but an honest accounting of the situation will reveal for most people, I think, that eventually more of you is going to be given into it than you initially were aware of. And I didn't know how much of me had been lost to me in the process. I couldn't see that. I'm still learning that, figuring that out. But I thought that would be the big push on the other side. The big push on the other side initially ended up being grieving. I didn't know, I was not prepared for how long the grieving process would occur in me as it regarded leaving all those clients whom I had come to love.
What were you grieving in all of that?
I was grieving the distorted parts of me that were given to the idea that they needed me. And that requires a sorting through for any of us in helping spaces, I think, to be brought back into a proper holding of it that would say, yeah, you do your part. But like I was saying, just like in the parenting space, there's way more going on here than just your efforts and their uptake. Way more, right? We're swimming through grace, and so many of what you think of as your efforts were brought to you in the first place in an inspired moment because of the love of God for everybody in the mix. And I give myself into those spaces in a way that can sometimes forget that. And then I can become imbalanced in the view of what I need to supply to people there. And so I'm still learning that, But the grieving too was just, I do love these people. I do care for them with a deep interest. I'm interested in their well-being. I'm interested in what becomes of their story. I want to know that they're going to be okay, and that the growth they're aspiring toward is going to be secured for them. And I'm not going to get to be a part of that with them in the same way anymore. I'm going to have to walk away from this all for a time. And that was a grievous experience for me. It broke my heart. Not in an improper way, just in an inevitable way, I think. And it took me about 6 months just to kind of get through a day without being interrupted by the size of that. And then, then I was able to start attending to Pete, and find more balanced approaches to exercise and realize what life outside of a clinical practice is like, what it's like for everybody else. Not having a few hundred living stories in your mind all day, every day is a big adjustment. And to be able to surrender those over in a posture of blessing and hope and trust has been a refreshment. But that's what it was like. That's what some of the initial experience was like. It wasn't easy, you know. And I know that it wasn't easy for a lot of the people that I had to say goodbye to. And I'm very thankful for the grace with which they held all of that with me. They were, to a person, so kind in their own grief. And I can't thank them enough for that, you know. I got to work with some pretty remarkable people. Like, I use the language of heroism a lot, and it's in reference to them. So, yeah, I hope they're all well, and I bless the very thought of them. Yeah.
Obviously, they can't be named.
No, they can't.
But
they can't. But they know who they are.
Yeah.
And if we spent so much as 1 hour together, you know who you are. So thank you to those people, all of them.
What I remember connecting to you in pieces in that season, like one, we were connected in the men's retreat, which I felt like was a much of a retreat for you as it was for the men, but just in totally different ways of like finding more of yourself.
It had that effect. I didn't experience it as a retreat.
not a retreat, but in the sense of we go onto the mountain and we encounter God and he reveals us to ourselves.
No doubt.
As opposed to, oh, this is a place for me to relax and like take stuff in. Like I know that it wasn't that for you. And I remember sitting at a fire with you and Jake before the retreat. And we were talking about, you know, like, what do we think the needs of the guys are and all that kind of stuff. And after we'd kind of done the practical sorting of that out, we were just hanging out.
Yeah.
And part of my story, I'm sensitive to the financial provision of this moment and going, whoa, you walked away from an income, you know?
The whole you know? Income. Yeah.
And had to embark on an unknown replenishing of or reestablishing how you're resourced,
flow,
you know, in a family.
Yeah.
And I think I asked you a question. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember the question I asked in that moment?
Not in its particular form.
But I said, oh, like, how are you feeling about this aspect of it? And do you remember what you said?
No, I don't.
Yeah, you said something along the lines, I don't remember exactly, but you said, look, in whatever Pietism this came out, it was, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I feel fully confident that Jesus is in it with me.
Yeah.
And that was remarkable in the like, oh, okay. That feels like a massive leap. And I was convinced that you didn't know.
Yeah.
And that you thought Jesus was in it with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Those two things were true.
And that was it was a beautiful witness to your trust in having to go on that journey and take the space and the time that you would have to, you know, like because your living expenses obviously didn't stop at the
That's
time.
right.
And
That's right. Yeah, and here is a good place to speak to in honor that a lot of people were very kind and gracious in that season. And whether it was literal provision that was extended to us, or whether, on the financial resource side, or whether it was just a community rallying around in a kind of collaborative hope with you through their expressions of encouragement and trust and belief in the things in you that you can't always maintain sight of. All of that was a gift. And I'd be remiss if I didn't name my parents in that space who extended themselves with care and with interest and with patience. And I'm very thankful for all of that, in whatever forms it came, through whomever it came. There were so many people who just through the expression of admiration that somebody would take such a risk to do something that they thought might be true. And the beauty in their reflections on just that were enough to help you away from the thought that you might have lost your mind in the decision that you'd made. And so as much as I had to meet any moment with courage, in equal parts, the courage was supplied by the voice of community and through the resourcing of community and family. And I couldn't be more grateful or humbled by that, And too, the men who have become my brothers, who entered into the risk of a curriculum from this dude in a communal and educational space as a new cohort of executives. That journey was so much a part of this whole process. And for the men in the forge, as the group has come to be called, every one of them, I thank them as well. They stepped out into risk with me in a way that was frontier-like, and convened with a bunch of strangers on my word, and in their hopes, and that's been a beautiful part of the journey too.
I won't name the name because it's a public forum, but one of the young bucks in that group, phoned me during that time, and he's like, "Hey, like Pete's extended this invitation to me, and I didn't know." And he was like, "I'm not quite sure, like, if I should do it or not." And I remember saying to him, and I think this is part of that season of like, you don't know, but you're good for it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I said, this is going to be the best investment you could possibly make. And he has recently probably said to both of us, but he's, the full circle of this is like the fruit that has borne in his life and how much of a joy that is for him.
Yeah.
As it's a celebration of the masculine genius in some way. And I'm not trying to take away from the feminine genius at all, but like the idea that we have to go out in order to, sow life, as opposed to receive and nurture in order for something to happen. And the vulnerability of that is actually where life comes, where life ends up being found. Yeah, I think of fondness of that individual.
Oh,
and
yeah.
yeah,
I
so
have
many
in
things.
mind the same man. I know as you're
Yeah.
naming him or referencing him. And I said to that fellow just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that he has brought to me much more in the space than I've brought to him.
Mm.
He has taught me so much. And all of those guys have. But that's right. It, on the masculine side, the personal discovery is found in the territories regarded as risk. And there isn't fulfillment without that. And I'm receiving a lot of education from those men in such spaces. And they spur me on into more. They suffer my my foibles with grace, and I'm just so thankful for them. There will never be another first instance of that thing.
Yeah.
And I just am so blessed that it's those guys, to a person, every one of them. We even had one in our first cohort that couldn't continue with the second, and he's on that list too. They continued to teach me. I am their pupil, and yeah, they put a smile on my face, those guys.
So I want to keep going in the story, but
take us wherever is helpful, Jason.
Yeah, I'm curious at what the scariest moment was in all of that for you. Where
I don't think there's just one.
I'll share some of them then. Where are the moments where you...
Well, definitely on the provisional side. I think I shared with you a few moments where, and I'll be candid too, not just fright, but a wrestling with shame. And
what do you mean?
The shame connected to, I'll be 50 in a few years, in 2.5 years. And as many of my friends, I'm graced to have many good friends. I count you among them and many of the people in this space. And a lot of those men are considering retirement at the same age as me. And I'm just figuring out what I'm going to do when I grow up. And if I'm not very careful and very judicious, just like many other people, I think, in a similar kind of dynamic. And I think especially for men, I can hold that moment with a scorn for all the decisions prior to it that I didn't make that would have potentially resulted in something better for my family while I was undergoing this transition, a more comfortable way for them to be able to inhabit the moment. So that's where the shame shows up in me, I think, as a distortion, but I want to name that just to be confessional about it. I named to you a few moments where I told you I had my head in my hands in front of my fireplace going, what have I done? Not a sense of having made the wrong decision, but how am I going to do this? And it was the kind of decision that did have to be made prior to clarity. Clarity was never going to come in terms of the exact how. I only had a why and only had a what, So some of those moments were not just scary, they were terrifying. The ones at 3 a.m. where your son's recently graduated, needs to go to university. You got another one that's not long in the queue there, and another one besides that. And, are they going to be okay? And is what their father is representing to them in this season of his life, am I carrying this challenge with honor? Am I too often moving into a place of despondency? I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, and that's a peacemaker. And two things are hallmarks of 9s. One is a real vulnerability to melancholy, because we tend to look at the whole picture all the time instead of experiencing the freedom of a smaller aspect of it. And then 2, because of everything that we contain in quiet, we're sometimes ambushed by our anger. And my kids have had to endure a lot from me in the space of unknowing, as they've witnessed their dad not in the flow and the routine of a process that he lives out in his days that he knows like the back of his hand. That's what they were used to when I was in clinical practice. Now I'm home more often. That's where my office is. They encounter me at my worst and my best. And that's confessional too, and I thank those wonderful children for what they've endured there. The other difficult moments are that I'm a high introvert. I have a creative soul in me that wants to express, but I'm met by my introversion, which would prefer to do that in a cave behind a waterfall under a pseudonym, and put things out to people that way.
Batman.
Sure, Batman. Yeah, hadn't thought of that, but there you go.
I mean, you described it perfectly.
That's
maybe.
right. Must have been a Freudian dynamic there.
Nice.
But to take what I have and to put it in front of people as a way to give what I've got and not hold anything back, to not mask what isn't yet developed or complete in me by censoring myself endlessly, And so if I'm going to do this, it has to be true. It has to be Pete giving expression to the thing. And I don't particularly enjoy being in front of people. It's not something that's comfortable for me. It's frightening. And nonetheless, I continue to be requested into such spaces. And so I think fear is always going to be a part of this. And I know fear is always a part of any aspiration toward growth, because growth is predicated on aspiring in the direction of something that you are not yet, or don't have familiarity with, or expertise in. It's new, it's novel. And so it's also a corresponding aspect of courage. Courage never shows up in the absence of fear or with an absence of fear. It's predicated on that. And I'm just praying for the capacity to locate courage, to continue to move in the directions that might be uncomfortable, but are nonetheless faithful. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and what it sounds like is that it's not uncomfortable because it's not you. It's uncomfortable because it
is me.
Because it is you, and you're in some sense inexperienced at being you.
I'm inexperienced at being me in a public or a digital medium. I'm very experienced in being me, and I'm very contented
new
to do that
for sure
in any kind of immediate space between me and another.
Mm-hmm.
But putting yourself out there in this way is a different kettle of fish.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one that I have zero experience with because I've warded it off for so long.
Yeah. In one sense, maybe what you and your personality find is easier to love one-to-one.
Yeah.
And it feels like we had this one meeting at your house where you invited some close friends who had maybe experienced you in, it was actually at a friend's house. It wasn't
Yeah.
at your place, but
It's had a wonderful couple of friends' homes.
yeah.
Home.
And they communally expressed this desire of moving from one to one and seeing that there's more love and goodness to share one to more,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily one to many or
That
just
was
one
another
to
of the
more,
catalytic
you know?
moments that you asked about, right?
Yeah.
Like what was a moment where you knew?
Yeah. So maybe share that, like what that experience was like for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I, because I hadn't spent much time thinking about the forms of offering that would be cultivated, because when you've censored the thought in yourself inside of your introversion about making such an offering, you don't tend to think very creatively about what it might look like. And so I had made the decision. I had left the practice. I was doing work, in the time in between, and was out of sabbatical, but was still asking the question about the digital platform. And the voice of those wonderful people in that space reflected things to me about where gifts and capacities landed for them in ways that they could experience as nourishing.
Mm.
And you were there that evening as a kind guide for us all through those considerations, and were the perfect person to host our thought there, because I just couldn't do it myself. I was not going to ask this of people, and so even the asking for reflection of that kind had to come as a matter of surrogacy.
Mm.
And you and our friend Luke were great advocates into that moment. And then consistent reflections that I'd heard before, but maybe was inclined to forget or to not take in, that that people were looking for more or continued modes of presence, whether it came through the written word or whether it came through the spoken word or curricula or whatever, that the presence to host these considerations with was something that they hoped for more of. And then I began to ask questions about, well, how can you impart presence when you're not with people? And the answer proves to be, you put what's true in and of your heart into something to the best of your ability. And that means every word you speak. It means to the best of your ability, not treating any moment as something to rush through en route to your preferred interest at the expense of the person that you happen to be with. And all of that is kind of purgative and purifying, because if you're going to make these kinds of offerings, you're going to be conditioned in the process of the offering made. And so somehow their shared voice on that evening is what transpired into today. This happens to be the day that the Vocatio platform is released for people, and it'll become something more clarified in time, no doubt. my commitment is to continuing to look at the thing with the question in mind in all of the spaces that I encounter that audience in. What is needed, and what do I have to give that can benefit? And it's been fun. There's aspects of it that are just fun. I'm learning how to write. I'm taking the risk of writing and offering it prior to, being a bona fide author, or an author with a pedigree in educational spaces beyond the academic writing that I did for years.
And you now have a Substack available that people can subscribe to.
Do I have a Substack?
Well, I don't know.
Am I on Substack? I will.
You have I think you do.
Okay.
So,
well, you would know better than me, maybe, but there's a subscription option on the site at least, and getting to think about how to present these wonderful people to people that are in the process of their own vocational journey. And we were down filming a documentary with a friend of mine. That's a great adventure to me. Those creative aspirations fulfill me. And I love people. I love the human being itself. And I love to share the fractal dynamics of the image of God as expressed by the individuals who live their lives faithfully and are on a quest to do something honest and true and beautiful with the life that they're given. And that's what I encountered in the work and in the clinical sense. And I every day had the thought, I'm just some schmuck in a room, but this is a story that people deserve to know. This hero that I'm working with who overcame an abuse history against all odds, a woman that by rights should be dead, and has refused for the shattered dynamics of family of origin to be the sum total of her story, or the hundreds of people I worked with who walked out of addiction, like climbed out of that hole. There's a endlessly meaningful and virtuous and beneficial part of that process that is imminently beneficial to the hearer, because we find ourselves in all of those stories. And there's a solidarity in that gets lost in the way that cultural forms are brought to us now. And I just always had the thought, what if we could get this incredible person in front of, forget Hollywood. This is just so much better, and I look forward to sharing some of those stories with people and to collaborating with clients, past and friends and community around getting these human matters in front of the culture in my own tiny way, in our own tiny way. And there's just so much in my heart connected to what I've witnessed that isn't meant just for me. It doesn't feel that way. And so in a certain sense, taking this risk is as much to assuage that compulsion that feels like there's an urgency around it. There are heroes in our midst. Everybody that you encounter, the stranger in our midst, they have a story, and it's every bit as deep and as harrowing as yours. And if you look at your story, it's deep and it's harrowing. It's parents trying to save their marriage in the midst of a challenge around autism. It's being on the other side of grief and loss. It's all of these things that are our lives. And I was just given the beautiful call into nearness to all of that in a way that looked at the depth of it all, and that could translate those moments in people's lives in a way that would allow them a sense of coherence about it, and a few steps to look at in what was to come. And translation is something I'm very interested in, translating the human heart back to humanity,
Why do you think your heart moves in that direction?
I don't have an answer for that. I have the heart I was given. I only know that it moves in that direction, and it always has. And that is the version of Parker Palmer's question, what can you not do? I can't not have regard for these things in almost a perpetual way. I can't avoid the question of what is the meaning of this thing, this moment, this life, this technology, this aspect of our culture. What is the meaning of it? And what help needs to be brought to this person or this community such that the unnecessary aspects of suffering could be eliminated from that midst, right? Or the midst of those people or that individual. My earliest memories of being a child, and this may sound neurotic or crazy, were of this kind of thing, these sorts of matters in family, and as I reflected on the world that was presented to me all the way back. I've scarcely lived a day, where these questions weren't something I carried. And so I don't have an explanation for that. I got there whatever God put into me.
It strikes me that I wonder if you were doing psychotherapy in your clinical practice, or if you were doing something that masked itself as psychotherapy, and I wonder if you could say what you do with people.
I think I've said part of it. I don't think that what you just claimed there is false at all. And you'd have to ask the clients, they would be a better.
And I'm not saying it doesn't have psychotherapeutic aspects to it.
Yep.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, for those who don't know you or encountering you in this medium as the only place, I think it's transcends it in some way.
I agree. I think essentially aiding people in the translation of the things that plague them, getting clarity on what's wrong first, and how to think about it in the context of the larger picture that so much of culture tries to pull us away from. Giving them a a map that goes beyond what has plagued them, to see their difficulty inside of that context. I think also what I was doing was rallying with people, being a surrogate hoper in the spaces where they were bereft of hope, or being a surrogate believer in the places where they were bereft of belief in themselves. I know I woke up every day with a belly full of that. And that's a vulnerability too, because it can distort how you offer yourself in those spaces. And every therapist who is in private practice or otherwise has to kind of ski down that hill.
You got to figure out how to
and
walk with hope.
That's right.
And desire and reality.
That's right.
And those aren't always going to line up in the way that they form within us.
Yeah, so a candid reflection on all of that is that it's messy, and that's why it's better referred to as craft. The wider discipline of therapy, psychotherapy in the official forms that it's wrought, wants to so often frame it in the same terms that we have, I think, mistakenly framed medicine and education itself, etc., with, formulae about all of it. In this situation, do this. But you're dealing with a person and a story and a life and a living system and a worldview and ethics and morals and theology and philosophy and all of that. Mm-hmm. And it isn't just psychology, So I'm honored that you would say that I was doing something other merely than psychotherapy with people. But I think translating their lives, coming up with a true rendering of the story they were living, and then an aspiration in collaborative terms about what they might live otherwise, based on the wisdom traditions that have always guided humanity into better. That's what I was attempting to do. And I was clear in my attempts at bringing wisdom into that space. And wisdom isn't something that is spoken of an awful lot in modern psychology. And there's a number of reasons for that I don't know we should get into right now. But I wanted my clients to have an encounter with wisdom, to put in front of them the resources that I knew were reliable, that could help guide their thinking as to what they are as a human being. And a vision of what the human being is, and how to establish a worldview that can live in support of that inside of the context that the human being is planted in the entire creation and in society and in community and etc. Philip Cushman, a brilliant psychotherapist and research psychologist, think he's at the University of Washington still, I don't know, but he calls this a hermeneutic circle, right? Hermeneutics is the understanding of something in its context and against the backdrop of its context. Understanding the writings of, the Old Testament, for example, not merely against the backdrop of the modern West, but inside of the context that the authors themselves were living and what was going on in the broader political picture and sociological picture, etc. And he rightly, I think, emphasizes the need for that in the practice of psychotherapy, in his critique of what the industry has become. And he was writing about this already 3 decades ago. And he's the father of empty self theory, the theory of the empty self, right? So I was trying to do that in my own way. People encountered invitations to consider things beyond the discipline of what psychology has, beyond what the discipline of psychology has to offer in its official forms, right? So we'd bring philosophy into the mix and theology into the mix. We'd bring art into the mix. We'd listen to a song together and review what was summoned from their soul in the hearing of it. And man, it was a joy to be able to enter into depth in those ways, you know?
In some sense, like, your gifts were designed to meet people at the dead ends of their way of being. And then say, oh, do we have imagination beyond this?
Yeah.
And just the access that you have to be able to imagine roots and ways of exploration beyond the place where people feel stuck.
Yeah.
My conclusions have led me to a dead end.
Yeah.
And then being able to see life again as, and it's no surprise to me that hope would be one of the substrates that's the only way it can occur.
That's right. And I think another, just as you're saying that, one of the things that was what I was up to in that space was to reclaim love as an understandable and essential and the central feature in all of our human stories. And to the best of my ability to represent that in its appropriate forms in that space, to hold out a view of that was participatory and lived and embodied in the way that you welcome people into your presence and in the way that you hope for them. Love was at the heart of all of that, you know.
Yeah, a clarity that I feel like I've received from you is an unshakable confidence that there is always a way to relate to your neighbor that doesn't break relationship, at least not from your end. They might choose to break it from their end, but that you have a confidence that you can move through life. You can inhabit these paths of adventure without having to.
You never have to game the system.
And wound yourself or the other in the process.
That's a fact.
And that's been a real gift. But probably we can hang there at another time too. But as you've launched your site today as the official marker of like, hey, here's you offering yourself to the world officially and publicly and in a new paradigm and a new medium.
Here's some fish and some loaves out of a wicker basket from a little boy.
Like, I'll ask two questions and you can ask them in whatever order you want. Like, how does it feel today? And then today being the day that it happened, but then also what are you most proud of as you are putting that forward? And that might be a vulnerable question, but.
Well, there's no might. That's a vulnerable question. I'll answer that one and then.
The day and what you're proud of.
Yeah. No, I'll answer the day first. I was sitting with my wife on the deck this morning before we entered our work days, and it was just full. My experience is full. It's reflective. It's filled with gratitude. It's filled with a sense of community. I'm I'm just thankful to say, for what it's worth, here is an offering from my heart to you. And for what it's worth, the things I've put on these pages or spoken in these terms are my best attempt in that moment at telling and holding the truth with you. And, pray for me in that space, that my capacities in that way become enhanced in time. There's a sense of vulnerability, as I spoke to before, about being the high introvert who's now, it kind of feels like you're in a glass jar and you look out and you see the refractory kind of images that come into you from the outside, but at best they're just a distortion, because they're in your imagination more than they are the facts of the matter as people experience you while they're looking in. And it feels like there's a one-way viewing that I'm not accustomed to there, right? Here we're looking at one another's lives and into one another's eyes presently. Mm-hmm. And in this new medium, just out it goes. And I'm not accustomed to that. And so I'm trying to hold it with humor and mirth. And it's I was saying to you before, it's such a comparatively tiny offering, people are put in front of much more exposure than I am or ever will be. And so I have to have some laughs about that. It simultaneously feels enormous and very tiny. And I think that's actually not a bad way to hold it open-handedly. What I'm proud of. I can't frame it in those terms. I will do my best. I'm not trying to be pious or anything. I am grateful. I'm grateful to be able to have something to give to people that I promised. That more marks my experience. I'm proud of the people who helped me get here. That's what I'm most proud of. I can look you in the eye and tell you that's the truest answer to that question I can give you right now.
Can you find places in yourself that have journeyed this thing well? 3 years
I think
of odyssey.
Yeah. No, I'd even extend the odyssey back more than 3 years. If you're asking about journeying well, I've faced most of my days with a quest to do my best. I can say that in truth to you as well. I've meant the things. There you go. I mean the things I say. And if there's something to be proud about, maybe that's it. I do my best to not let out of this mouth an undiscerned sentence emerge, and to hold regard for my neighbors and the consequences of my speech. And I need to do a better job of that. I think this is common with my own family, where I feel the most comfortable, But I think very carefully. I think long and hard about what could benefit people, and I try to be guided by that. And that is something that has guided my quest in whichever domain of life I was as a professional anything. I held that in mind and heart when I was a carpenter. I held that in mind and heart when I was a young tree planter. I was taught well to hold those things in mind and heart. I see that in the founder of our faith and in the sustainer of it. And I want to take on more of the attributes to do that better. And I suppose another thing that had to be overcome, and I'm thankful to be on the other side of it, was the withholding of oneself until a perfect offering could be rendered. And
that you didn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, I did do it for too long. It was part of what kept me in a place that I might have been better suited to leaving earlier than I did. And I don't have any kind of exacting clarity on when that should have happened. I just know that I found myself floundering in a way that might have been able to be avoided. But it's all grist for the mill with the Spirit, in our continued education. But to put things out there at what for me is 80%, approval of my own on the final product, and to go, well, if we don't do it that way, then I'm gonna, have a few articles to hand to people before I breathe my last at some old age on a deathbed. And I don't want to face myself on that day in such a manner. Or be faced by the ones that could have benefited from whatever I had in me, So that is a posture I'm trying to learn how to occupy with some energy, because I've been inspired by people very close to me who are experts in that. My buddy Reese is an expert in having a good idea, building it to a sufficient state, and offering it to the world, and then just getting on with things. And Jake, our buddy Jake, is like that too. And I've always admired that. I don't have those natural dispositions in me. I never will. And so I have to rally in those spaces.
And relinquish.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm being taught that. And I'm thankful for the education. Yeah.
Is there anything else in your heart to mark the day?
I think just to say thank you, and to, there are a lot of people invested in this little offering, and to say back to them all, we did it. They helped me into such a space, and they are as much they're as much to blame, or they are as much the contributors to that product as am I. Had I not learned from them in the space of the clinic, I would not have this understanding, whatever understanding I have of humanity to offer. So to say thank you, I mean, that would be, the great mystic Meister Eckhart said, if the only prayer you ever issue in your entire life are the words thank you, that will have been enough. And I think that's true. This life is derived. It's not constructed. It's received. As I step out into communal spaces and relationships with people, I receive more of who I am. And I look forward to more of that occurring for all of us.
Me too. Especially for you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, thank you for hosting all of this today in such a artful way for an older brother who is in a vulnerable space.
You're welcome. And I hope at some point, whatever I've missed in that, the questions that are yearnings of others in that space,
Sure.
that they'll emerge in however,
You bet.
however that. But for today, I think that's enough.
You bet.
So
thank you, Jason.
You're welcome. Thank you.